Hello,
everyone.
A very warm welcome to this WEC conversation, which is dedicated to the discussion of the situation in the global labor markets. We will today cover a lot of ground. So let me share the screen with you. There you go. I have called it Regional Roundtable Blitz because it is one. And if my computer decides to cooperate, that would be great. So there we go. So we have a very beautiful lineup of speakers today from all over the world, and also from Lightcast. Elena today is going to cover the view from the data point, the analysis of the data that can be found on the online labor markets. Without further ado, and keeping awareness of the time that we have for everyone, I suggest that we start. So let's buckle up and dive right in. Before I start, I just want to say your questions are all very welcome. Please pop them in the chat, and then after everyone presents, we will address the most interesting questions. And we will hope to have a run through all the presentations first, and then have a discussion at the end, and I'm sure we can make it. But what I want to start with is basically the sentiment of the purchasing managers. And we've seen that over the past 3 years, it's been relatively stable in a sense that the developed economies, if you look at the top three, the developed economies have been mostly in the red, while the emerging markets have been mostly in the green. And if you look more detailed down the chart, you will see that India, China, and Indonesia are probably the greenest of all, which shows the positive sentiment and the positive development. So 2 days ago, OECD has announced their forecast, interim forecast for the coming couple of years. And basically, they predict continued inflation pressures in some countries and softening of the GDP growth at the global level. Of course, it varies around the countries, as we see with the Purchasing Managers Index on the right. But overall, the situation is not very easy, let's put it this way. I want to quote a few pages from our recent publication, which is the economic report. You will see the QR code on the top left corner where you can download the publication and have a deeper dive. But today I just want to, oh, sorry, this is not what I meant. I just want to show you that in 2023, we had a very modest 0.5% growth in sales revenues for the for agency work market, not temporary. And that's a nominal term growth, because the real term growth is actually negative due to the fact that inflation in 2023 was at 6.7% globally. And in terms of people placed in jobs, we had a marginal decrease at the global level. And in 2024, we see here a selection of markets where mostly at the global level, we have a decline with only a couple of exceptions that you see above zero. That is Chile with its amazing figures, and India. But overall, the situation is actually greatly challenging. But the big question is, what is behind the figures? And today is exactly the day where we are going to look at this and discuss it. And because the differences in the geographical situations are so vast, then we have people from different geographical regions of WEC to represent and explain what's going on. But to start, I would like to invite Elena Magrini from Lightcast. She's the head of global research, and she has a lot of qualifications and experience, and she will basically walk us through how this research body looks at what's going on with the labor markets at the moment. Please, Elena.
Thank you, Victoria. And yes, I think we got a big question to try and answer today, and I'm excited to hear the regional views from all the different partners. You've asked me to set the scene, so I'm going to try and capture as many trends as I can. Before I start, if you go to the next slide, just to introduce who we are at Lightcast. We are a labor market analytics company. We work across the world, and our mission is to unlock new possibilities in the labor market by providing data and insights to the private sector, companies, education providers, and governments in relation to the labor market to help them navigate changes. And there's a lot of changes, and that is why we're here to talk about this today. So on the next slide, I try to capture a few of the key changes that understanding them may help us answer the question that we got today about our labor markets hanging off a cliff. We are in an era of unprecedented turbulences. There's a lot going on in the labor market right now, and also in the broader sense, not just even, there are a lot of dynamics going on even beyond the labor market that are affecting the labor market, not least geopolitical instabilities as one of them. Within the labor market, we see a number of different factors affecting how things are shaping up. From a demographic point of view, we know there are a lot of shifts in the demographics of the population across the world. There is a race for talents because companies are increasingly in need for the latest talents with the latest skills that, in order to thrive and continue to grow. But we also know that the jobs are changing because of the rise of AI, the green transition, and other macro trends related to the way of working. And then we know that other factors that are also affecting the labor markets are related to changes such as labor mobility and migrations and policies related to them, as well as a polarization in the way in the type of jobs that are available in the labor market, both at the lower level and the high level, which also increases inequalities. And at the same time, we also have changing expectations and power dynamics between employers and workers, which also affect how the labor market is shaping up. And overall, when you put all these trends together and you try to make sense of all of them, it boils down to two big questions that I set out in the next slide. The first question is around who is going to do the work. So a lot of the things that are happening in the labor market right now are shaping the available supply of talent that will be required to fill jobs. And then the second big question is around how is the work going to get done. And this is about not just finding the talent, but understanding the changing dynamics in terms of the skills requirement of jobs, and what this means for the way we work. So what I try to do for the remaining of the presentation is provide a little bit of an overview of these two topics and a couple of slides on how they may play out in practice. As you will see, it's a little bit more complicated than just so one size fits all in terms of these key findings. So on the next slide, I start looking at what's going on in terms of who is going to do the work. And here, especially in many developed countries, but overall in the world as well, the key challenge is about talent scarcity. Companies are seeing increased competition for talent, and this is only about to get fiercer. The main reason behind this is slower growth in the working age population worldwide. So through 2040, the working age population across the globe is expected to slow in 8 out of 10 countries. So quite a significant trend that we see globally. And in some parts of the world, actually, it's not just about a slower growth, but it's about a decline in the share of working age population. And that's particularly the case in 3 out of 10 countries globally, primarily in Europe and in East Asia. So there's a shrinking population, so fewer people able to do the jobs. And historically, many developed countries have tapped into these shortages by addressing them with migration. So attracting migrants from other countries. And that has helped fill many of the vacancies, for example, in services jobs, in healthcare jobs, etc. However, what we are seeing nowadays is that not just the working age population in many countries is shrinking, but migration is also falling. And net migration over the next 20 years is projected to fall in 60% of developed economies. So this will make the challenge of finding the right talent even more acute. We know on the flip side, because I wanted to add also a positive note to this, because it's not all doom and gloom, is that there's an increased labor market participation in a lot of developed countries. Especially over the past 10 years, we've seen that labor force growth has outpaced working age population growth in some countries, primarily developed countries. And so this, at least in part, can offset some of the challenges related to this lower growth in working age population and the fall in migration. But it won't be enough to address the needs of companies, especially in developed economies. So this is from a talent scarcity perspective. Next slide, instead, we look at the second trend. So how's the work going to get done? And here I wanted to draw your attention to three key trends, which are required for companies that want to keep up with the pace of skill change in their work. The first one is adapting to AI. We've heard that it's a macro trend that we see everywhere. But the thing to notice here is that generative AI is significantly impacting the labor market, not only anymore in terms of the tech sector, but in terms of non-tech roles as well. And so this is changing the dynamics in terms of the skills required across sectors. Similarly, growth of green skills, this is not just about new green jobs, but is actually mostly about the greenification of other parts of the labor market that are traditionally not green. And so again, the skills requirements will change to answer these needs. And likewise, cybersecurity is becoming critical in every industry, and this is pushing up demand both for jobs and skills related to the sector. So in the last couple of minutes, two slides I wanted to show you. Next one, how this will all happen in practice. Well, the impact won't be felt evenly across occupations. Actually, what we are seeing is that jobs that have high disruption are in the IT sector, media, business sector, whereas more labor-intensive jobs are less likely to see disruption. But actually, what we see is that the labor-intensive jobs are actually the ones that are more likely to suffer from shortages in demographics. So you can kind of pick your poison in terms of your challenge. And then on the other end, next slide, these trends won't be felt evenly across the globe. So on the next slide, we plot the challenges for different countries in terms of projected average annual working age population and capacity to absorb new skills. And as you can see, different parts of the world face different challenges. And in particular, I want to draw the attention to Southern and Eastern European countries, which are the ones most at risk. So to conclude, next slide, what does this all mean for the staffing industry? Well, wait and see is no longer an option in a labor market that's changing so fast. Action is needed now. And in particular, there are three keywords that can spark the discussion later. One is around agility. So how can we build flexible talent pipelines that can rapidly respond to these changes? How can we do this in a data-driven way? So how can we ensure that the data is embedded behind the decisions that are being taken? And it's a big challenge. So it's not something that we can do on our own. So how can we build strategic partnerships across business and education and governments so that we can shape a workforce that works for everyone? I'm going to stop there. Thank you, and looking forward to questions later.
Thank you very much, Lena, and thank you for being on time. This is much appreciated. This is a very big scope that you have just outlined, and I think we can spend the whole hour discussing just your presentation, but we will have to move to the regional views on what you said and probably more. So our next speaker is Jackie Ford, the CEO of the Federation of African Professional Staffing Organizations. And she will cover South Africa, but also broader African context. Jackie, if you could unmute and
Thank you.
spend the next 5 minutes.
Thank you, Victoria. And Elena, there's some really amazing insights that align significantly with some of the things I'm going to discuss now. So effectively, I would like to look at 3 questions that were posed, and we did get input on this from quite a few different parties, but I must also say that we had very mixed views on most of these, and dependent on who you asked and where you asked the questions, that was the views that were expressed. So really asking the question, is the labor market riding a high or low tide? And as I've said, mixed views. A lot of the I think it was weighted more towards low tide. So looking at some alignment there with some of the international views expressed and some of the data that's been shown or going to be shown. Obviously, markets under pressure currently, having very low economic growth rate, always impacts the job market, and there's some stagnation in the job market. And I think that's also very notable that we've had a very low economic growth rate, and we're not anticipating significant growth in that space moving forward either. We're also plagued with the very high unemployment rate in South Africa, and particularly amongst the youth. And recently, we have now a government of national unity. And just in the last week or 2 weeks, could have been a bit longer because the first budget that was presented was a few weeks ago, that wasn't passed in our parliament. So there is some economic uncertainty and perceived uncertainty, and obviously that in itself has pressure on the labor market. On the upside, however, we also have proposed amendments, legislative amendments that are relatively positive in many aspects in terms of employers. So that could provide some positive impetus into the labor market and create a slightly more positive economic outlook. The second aspect that I want to talk to is the flexible workforce solution. We had the question around whether it's expansionary or streamlining. And again, quite mixed views depending on where you're actually sitting. So some sectors experiencing a more positive cycle, and I'm going to expand on that shortly, and others in decline. So on the decline side, obviously, we have certain sectors that are under huge pressure that are facing some redundancies within their organizations, and some that have moved to short-time or part-time work. And obviously that impacts significantly, particularly if there is a flexible workforce on site. So having said that, there's also sectors where they're very positive cycles in terms of temporary agency work. So when we have the labor market or the economy that is under pressure, oftentimes, we all know, many on the call, the recruitment and staffing sector as a whole feels that impact first. So when the market is buoyant, companies hire. When the market is in decline or tough economic conditions, companies sit on their hands and no moves are made. So when that happens, the direct recruitment or permanent recruitment, as we call it, is affected. And you will find an uptick often in the contracting or temporary agency workspace, because an employer will be more likely to bring in a contract or temporary service than hire a direct permanent employee. So when I say that the views are mixed, it largely revolves around that. So definitely direct hire, we're finding a lot more stagnant, and I'm bringing that in. I know you were focusing on temporary agency work. A lot more stagnant, the roles are a lot more difficult to fill. So with that comes a bit of an opportunity also in the temporary or flexible staffing workspace. Moving to my last point, I'm also cognizant, Victoria, because I know we tight lines here. Business challenges in terms of the labor market in recent months. Again, I've listed the main one because that was a common one that came across from everyone that we spoke with. So when we say the war on talent, and some of you might be thinking, but hey, hold on, what are you saying? You just told us about your high unemployment rate. Well, we've got a very tough, I say it's a bit of a dichotomy. We have large level of unemployed, but majority unskilled. And then we do have talent shortages, particularly in some of the more higher level occupations. And here again, and I think it's something that's broader than just South Africa. If we look significantly in the IT space, and Elena, I know you mentioned cybersecurity as one of those sectors. We find it here. We've got a very robust IT sector in South Africa, and a lot of those jobs we're finding there is talent shortages. So war on talent in terms of creating talent pipelines, in terms of being able to provide talent into clients. And then with that then comes the aspect of the talent management as well, having multi-generational workforces comes into the mix. And also with that, we had a presentation yesterday revolved largely around Gen Z and the changing expectations of these generations shifting into the workspace. Again, the rise of AI is significant. Again, some presentation we were at yesterday highlighted for us that in the next few years, 45% of nearly all jobs will have a component that can be run or managed through AI. And we're finding now also, obviously, the bots, the chat bots, already in the HR space are causing a significant stir. We've got a fantastic organization in South Africa that have created a chatbot that specifically operates in the disciplinary space. So it's a fantastic addition to any HR team. But there were a lot of murmurs around the room when that was introduced yesterday. So multi-generational workforces, rise of AI, more pressure from unions. Thank you. And but then again, it creates more opportunities. So expansion of services, a lot more outsourcing, businesses moving more to consultancy type roles, more recruitment process driven. And with all of these things do also come opportunities. It depends on largely which way you're looking at it. Thanks so much, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Very interesting and a big pool of challenges, however, not unique, because I think some of our colleagues will mention some of these challenges in other regions. So wonderful. And I'd like to invite now Masahiro, who is our country manager for Northeast Asia. He's the head of Manpower Group Japan, and he will cover the 3 countries of the region. Can you please start? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Victoria. It's an honor to have this opportunity to share with you the current situation and the challenges of the labor market in the Northeast Asia. So now I will explain the contents by using some slides. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yes. The Northeast Asia region is composed of 3 countries, China, Korea, and Japan. Although geographically close, there is little direct relationship between the talent markets of these countries. At the same time, they face common challenges such as declining birth rates and aging populations, economic uncertainty, and talent mismatches. In this presentation, I'd like to analyze the impact of factors such as the economy, market supply and demand balance, as well as laws and regulations on the human resource business in Japan, China, and Korea. I will also touch upon the responses as well as changes in the models. Since Japan is my specialty, please allow me to explain mainly about Japan. Next slide, please. First, about Japan. On the economic front, due in part to inflation over the past few years, rising recruitment and labor costs are putting pressure on corporate profits amidst a talent shortage. Recruiting costs for staffing and recruitment companies are also increasing year by year, but at the same time, demand is increasing. In terms of supply and demand, there is a shortage of talent with the necessary skills, especially in IT, which is hindering the growth of companies. In addition, staffing companies are also struggling to attract and supply talent. As a result, the staffing business is shifting from registration-based staffing to indefinite-term employment staffing. And there is an accelerating trend towards implementing training and upskilling programs aimed at developing talent with specialized skills. More and more staffing companies are shifting their business model from mere skill matching to one that focuses to develop and match. On the legal and regulatory front, stricter regulations on working hours can be cited. This has led to a growing trend for non-core work to be carried out using external resources provided through staffing and BPO, business process outsourcing, which in turn has increased demand for staffing and outsourcing services. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. In summary, despite the challenges in supply, the demand for services of staffing and recruitment companies in Japan is further increasing. Under these circumstances, the role of the human resources in the human resource industry will go beyond simple skill matching and will be called upon to provide more sophisticated services. For example, in staffing, the demand is shifting from mere skill matching to a develop and match model that emphasizes upskilling. In the placement and recruitment industry, major recruitment agencies are increasingly offering HR strategy proposals as a value-added service that contributes to a company's HR strategy. Additionally, outsourcing is shifting from mere business processing to process optimization support that includes consulting and is helping companies enhance their competitiveness. However, while large staffing and recruitment companies are investing in this model shift and strengthening their consulting capabilities, the situation is becoming more challenging for small and medium-sized HR companies. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Next, let's look at China and South Korea. On the economic front, China is experiencing downward pressure on its economy, particularly due to real estate recession, while South Korea is facing economic uncertainty. These are causing a decline in demand for staffing companies that is in turn leading to a deterioration in their profit margins. As a countermeasure, An increasing number of companies are working to reduce costs with AI and advanced digital tools. In terms of supply and demand, both China and South Korea are experiencing a growing mismatch between supply and demand, with unemployment rates remaining high, especially among young people. On the regulatory front, both China and South Korea are tightening regulations on staffing services and shifting from a staffing model to a business process outsourcing model. In other words, while staffing services are declining in both countries, in response, the BPO, business process outsourcing market, is experiencing significant growth. That's all for the explanation of the market situation in Northeast Asia. Thank you.
Many thanks, Masahiro. Clearly, there are specific issues to the Northeast Asia that are probably shared with some other markets like aging and talent mismatch. Let's now move to Lohit in India. And just to say a couple of words, Lohit is the president of KESCOR, but also the regional representative for APEC Southern at WEC, and he's the president of the Indian Staffing Federation, and is very well equipped to give us a quick overview of what's going on. Please.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and I hope I'm audible to everyone. Yep. So in comparison to what has been said by some of the speakers before me, India is in many ways blessed with the demographic dividend as we speak now. I don't know how many of you saw a full city is being built behind me. There must have been half a dozen cranes that I can just see behind me. And if I just look over the skyline, there's some 24 constant cranes working and building different towers at all times. One among those towers are also called the Trump Towers, by the way. Anyways, that aside, if you look at the Indian market from 1991, and we take 1991 as the base, irrespective of the fact that India got independence in 1947, is because it's in 1991 is when the Indian economy opened to liberalization and foreign direct investment and capital flows into India. So hence, a lot of economic data or a lot of things that we speak about India, we compare with 1991. During this period, the population has actually grown from 846 million to now close to 1.44 billion people. We are still a year at least away from the latest census. So, give or take a few million people here or there, we would know only once the census is completely recorded. But more interestingly, it's the working age population, which has completely doubled from 465 million to 980, as you see on the slide. At that point, and with about 60% of the people in the labor force participation, you would find that the sum total of India's labor force equals to all the countries that we've shown on the tabulation right there. Together, these countries put together have 570 million, which is very, very similar to India's nearly 580 million people who are in the workforce. But India is today a $4 trillion economy, whereas these countries put together are about $18 trillion. If you look at the other interesting facet and data about India is that it's not just the demographic dividend, it's the number of people who are moving from informal work to formal work. And I think that's where, as staffing companies or as agencies, we have the biggest role, because we allow people to come, and it was spoken about by the previous speaker as well, the hire, train, deploy model, and prepare people for the jobs and move them upwards. So Indian labor market has only 20% in formal work, and 80% is in the informal work, majority in agriculture and other informal. Victoria, if you could move to the next slide. But at the same time, any economy would not just grow on the basis of its demographics, but an economy would also grow by what's happening in the economy per se. So if you see, as far as the GDP is concerned, and we put it here on a quarterly basis, you'd find that just like anywhere in the world, there was a sharp contraction because of the COVID lockdowns, and then there was a complete peak which got created thereafter, and then the market started to taper and grow in a certain significant way. The good part has been in the last couple of quarters has been that India's hovered above the 7.5, even 8% mark as far as the GDP growth rates are concerned. But something has happened in the last 5 or 6 quarters that the GDP started to inch downwards from the 8 odd percent to 7 to 6 and then 5.4. And obviously, you see there's a fiscal tightening, there are higher interest rates, consumption slowdown, and the other global headwinds. If we could move to the next slide. So what did this translate for our own workforce? At Indian Staffing Federation, we track and we research the data of all our members put together and cumulatively give it out there. You'd notice that while the line overall has consistently grown, and today Indian Staffing Federation is close to about 1.8 million plus workforce that we represent in India. And we've, even in the latest quarterly result, we've grown by about 2.5%. But this is a lot lower than what the staffing industry was doing. Just a few quarters back, we were growing at about 4 or even 5% quarter on quarter. So are we in the black? Yes, absolutely. We are in the black. We're still having net growth. But are we slowing down? Yes, clearly there are signs that it is starting to slow down and consumption is becoming a barrier or an issue. If we could move to the next slide. Just in interest of time, I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast. For the general staffing market, which is the bigger of the two, we represent the IT market as well as the general staffing market. You'd again notice that while the peaks and troughs were pretty rapid, and earlier it was said that we are so close to the economy that the minute the economy goes up, staffing picks up. The minute the economy starts to slow down, it's visible in our results. You'd see exactly the same what is trending there. So from just a couple of quarters back when we were even trending at 3.765 and over 5%, now we're trending at about 2.5. But we feel that in the coming fiscal, we should start inch upwards because Indian government has just announced two major policy benefits. One, interest rates for the first time after 5 years have come down. They've started to edge downwards. And second, now there is an income tax free on salary income up to 100,000 Indian rupees. If you earn as an income or a salary, then it's income tax free. Practically 98% of the work that we do in India as staffing companies is at an income level below 100,000. If we could move to the next slide. But you'd see something different in the next slide, which is the IT industry. And IT, unfortunately, is more attuned to the global market. So what happens in Europe and US typically impacts India because 90% of the work that Indian IT companies do is for Europe and US. Unlike our non-IT work, which is 82% for the domestic market. So when it comes to non-IT staffing business or non-IT part of the Indian economy, you'd notice 82% is domestically connected and driven. But when it comes to IT, it is predominantly connected to US and Europe. And you'd see that there have been sharp reductions from as high as 11%, 7, 6% growth quarter on quarter. We've gone down into negative territory for a couple of quarters, just now starting to inch back up to about 1.5% quarterly growth as far as IT headcount is concerned. If you could move to the next slide. Yeah. Sorry, a little bit of a busy slide, but what we are trying to show here is that some of the biggest workforce carriers are also some of the largest states in India. So it's often said that India is like a union of states, just like European Union is, and many of them speak different languages, different dialects, different food, and at the same time, they have different growth drivers as well. And those growth drivers is what drives the Indian economy and in the Indian workforce. So some of the states are doing fairly well. These are also established states which have better workforce environment. A lot of foreign direct investment in manufacturing has come into these states, and that's what is also fueling a lot of growth in these states. If we move to the next slide. And then comes as to what kind of growth that we see across the board. And in this case, you'd notice that Right on top is the construction workforce, which unfortunately is highly informal. Almost 99% is informal. And then you've got the various other segments of the economy and the industry, and it will be giving you a reflection as to the number of millions of workforce there. Many of these are constituents and segments where the staffing industry plays a key role. Other than construction here, majority of the cases, staffing does impact the workforce as well. Victoria, if you could move to the next slide. Yeah, so thank you very much and happy to come back into the queue if there are any questions as far as India is concerned. So we've not yet fallen off the cliff, and fingers crossed, we hopefully should not.
Thank you so much, Lohit. It's a pleasure to hear about the very positive experience in India. I would like now to move to the other side of the world, to Latin America, and invite Alejandra. Thank you so much for coming in. We are slightly behind schedule, so I would like to ask the remaining speakers to be concise and focus on the essentials. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Alejandra.
Thank you, Victoria. Hi, everyone. I am excited to be here and a little nervous because the audience is too big. But I want to talk you about the labor market in Latin America because this is face an important challenge, including but not limit a high informal labor, unemployment, and wage disparity. Informal labor is very common in Latin American region and affects a large part of this workforce. According with the Inter-American Development Bank, around 56% of employments in Latin America were informally, making the highest informal employment rate in the world. Some cases are, for example, Bolivia with 83% and Peru with 72%. And in these countries, like you see, more than 2/3 of the workforce are informal job situation. This means that they don't have access to labor benefits or social protection. Unemployment rates in Latin America vary by country and time period. According to recent data from the World Bank, the unemployment rate in 2022 is something like 10% for Colombia, 11.5% for Costa Rica, 9.5% for Brazil, and something like 3.3% for Mexico. Informal work directly impacts wages and working conditions. Informal workers usually earn lower wages and don't have benefits like Social Security, paid vacations, or protection against unfair dismissal. Additionally, informal employment is linked to unstable jobs, poor working conditions, and lack of union representation, making workers more vulnerable. So we have a different challenge here in the labor market in Latin America. Many challenges that affect is stability and growth of the region. The main ones include young unemployed, gender inequality, digital transformation, and weak social protection. These factors limit economic progress and prevent better working conditions for millions of workers. Youth unemployment is a serious issue in the Latin American region. The unemployment rate for youth people aged between 15 and 24 in Latin America is around the 2%, as high as the general unemployment rate, according to the Economic Commission for Latin America in countries like Colombia and Brazil. This rate exceeds 25%, showing how hard it is for the young people to find stable and well-paid jobs. The main causes include lack of work experience, weakness in education, and a gap between academic and training and job market demands. Gender inequality is another obstacle in this labor market. According with the International Development Bank, the labor participation gap between men and women is 26%, and women earn on average 17 less than men for the same job. Also, informal employer is high among women, reaching something like 20% in some countries. Barriers such as limit childcare service, hiring discrimination, and domestic work make it harder for women to enter and stay in the workforce. Definitely, technology is changing the labor market. Automatization and artificial intelligence are replacing many traditional jobs. The International Labor Organization estimates that 40% of current jobs in Latin America could be impacted by automatization in the next 15 years. However, only 30% of the people in the region have access to digital skills training. This increases the gap between workers who can adapt and those at the risk being left behind. Other way is that many workers in Latin America do not have adequate social protection. According with the World Bank, just only 46% of workers contribute to a pension, and less than 50% of workers have access to social protection. So we had a big challenge here. Yes, is the challenge of the work agencies. Private employment agencies play an important role in Latin American labor market. We help address this challenge by providing solutions to support formal employment, labor flexibility, worker training, just employment, and economic growth. How we can do that? One of the main contributions of our kind of agency of the industry is helping workers transition to formal jobs. In a region with informal employment, these agencies hire workers with access to social protection benefits and labor rights. Studies estimate that 80% of employees placed by private agencies have access to health insurance, pensions, and work accident coverage. This provides working conditions and promote formal job inclusion. Labor flexibility. This is a special characteristic of the work agencies. Provide flexibility for both for businesses and workers. For companies, we help adjust the workforce based on production needs, especially in industry with seasonal demand. And for workers, temporary contracts offer work-life balance and opportunity for people looking to enter or just change work sectors. Also, private employment agencies invest in training to improve workers' employability and close skill gaps in sectors like manufacturing, service, and technology. Just employment is the region is around 20%, but employment agencies help young people access the first job. Many young workers struggle to enter the labor market due to lack of experience. Work agencies provide opportunities to gain skills, build work history, and improve job prospects. In countries like Colombia and Argentina, over that 30% of temporary workers hired through agency are under 25 years. This helps young people transition into formal jobs and reduce high activity rates. So, my conclusion is the work agencies play a fundamental role in modernizing the Latin American labor market by promoting formal employment, offering flexibility, training workers, reducing just unemployment, and boosting the economy. These companies help improve job quality in the region and strengthen business competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It's definitely a big challenge to overcome. And we are clearly seeing a big stride made by the employment agencies in the region. Now, I'm moving on to the next speaker, who is Richard Walquist from American Staffing Association in the United States. Richard, we are running a little bit behind schedule, so I'd like to ask you to focus, and I give you a sprint of 3 minutes so that we have time for another speaker. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Sure. No. We'll try to just get to probably the top question that is on the minds of people all over the world is what's happening with tariffs and this administration. And just suffice to say that we've never seen anything quite like this. We don't know where it's going to end up, but currently the United States effective tariff rate is 8.5%. That's an increase from 2.3% in 2024. There are all sorts of assumptions. There's a lot of negotiation that is going on and is going to go on, but we could also assume that we could be experiencing a 15% effective tariff rate in Europe, Canada, Mexico, and others, 35% potentially in China. And of course, this administration has set up a import substitution agenda aimed at boosting U.S. manufacturing and reducing the trade deficit. So implications are profound for Mexico and Canada, and indeed our trading partners around the world. Labor markets are not falling off the cliff in North America. However, in part because of the tariff negotiations, Mexico's economy could decline by 1.3% in 2025 and decline again in 2026. But Mexico is also benefiting from a nearshoring boom, particularly in manufacturing, and that proximity to the United States and the nearshoring strategies will inure benefits both to the economy and to our industry. In terms of our industry, a big challenge is overcoming and amending a bad law that was put into effect a couple of years ago that changed the way we operate in the country, but we do see continued growth there. In Canada, there's cooling labor markets, as is the case in the United States. Unemployment rates, I should say, in Mexico, unlike other Latin American countries, are actually very good. They're about 2.6%. In Canada, again, the unemployment rate has been lowered over the last couple of years, and it's now at 2.3%. Looking ahead and looking at the clock here, the Canadian staffing industry will experience moderate demand in 2025 with growth in temporary help staffing in healthcare and also public sector. United States labor markets have continued to grow, but at a much slower rate than they have in the past, and that's expected to continue. Lots of variables right now in terms of public policy in the United States. We continue to have, as Jackie indicated, an imbalance in the number of job openings that we've got and the number of qualified workers to meet those job openings. We do predict that the staffing industry, after decline for now about 28 months in terms of employment, will return positive with all of those uncertainties factored in the second half of the year. Might be more likely in the fourth quarter. In fact, the most recent ASA predictions around the staffing employment for 2025 shows that it's going to be improving quarter by quarter. So a lot of challenges, all of the issues that have been referenced by my colleagues around the world in terms of influences of AI on the workforce, opportunities for upskilling and training, and opportunities to push more deeply into professional workforce solutions in addition to traditional transactional staffing. I'll conclude there.
Thank you so much, Richard. Definitely a sprint, and I see there's a lot to cover, but we will move now to the next speaker. We are coming to Europe with Sonia van Lieshout from Randstad as Head of Public Affairs, and Sonia is also the WEC Regional Representative for Europe. And she will give us a very quick summary on what's going on in the European labor markets. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Victoria. And indeed, a lot, like elsewhere in the world, a lot is happening here in Europe as well, of course. So we see a very challenging economic climate for our industry across markets in Europe at this moment in time. When you look at the penetration rate for Europe overall, it's at a stable and solid 2%. It has been for the past 3 years. That said, within the markets themselves, there's a difference between growth and decline, and especially the northern part of Europe is having a tough time when it comes to economic growth and the growth of our industry in that sense. That is also very much driven by unjustified restrictions, which are impacting our industry. We have seen that climate in Romania, in France, in Norway, in the Netherlands, in Germany, and a lot has got to do with the health industry, with the health sector, for that matter. But we also see overall labor market reforms, for example, like in the Netherlands, where the government is trying to decrease the amount of flexible contracts in the labor market, and especially agency work contracts, in order to grow permanent open-ended contracts for that matter. So a mixed picture, I was going to say, with regards to having unjustified restrictions in place and still dominating our industry in terms of growth rates. And one of the final elements which we are looking at is, of course, that we have a new European Commission in place as of the end of 2024. What we see is that on a policy level, the right topics are on the agenda. So we are looking at initiatives coming from the European Commission on skills, on skilling, competitiveness. European Commission is very much looking to establish a union of skills, as they say. They are very much looking to have quality jobs in place, and they consider our industry a very important stakeholder to contribute to all of those debates overall. Last but not least, which is not on the slide, but which is definitely worthwhile to mention, is that, of course, within Europe, constructive social dialogue is important for most of the markets, which is why social partners in the form of the trade unions, being Unie Europa and, of course, WEC Europe, are heavily involved in the 2 years capacity building project in order to provide the relevant social partners on a national level with training, with insights, with best practices on how to construct their social dialogue process on a national level. And this year, in June, we will see the end of the 2-year capacity building project, with hopefully some shared and joint recommendations towards the European Commission in order to further drive social dialogue across the European markets. I'll keep it at that. Maybe one final thing is to mention is that we see a lot of policy dossiers impacting our industry, but not specifically geared towards our industry. So worthwhile to mention is the European Pay Transparency Directive, the CSRD Directive, the AI Act, but also the Platform Work Directive. All linked to our industry, not specifically focusing on our industry solely. But yes, still having a severe impact. Victoria, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And indeed, the 2024 being the year of elections all over the world has now brought new administrations in all the respective countries, and of course that brings new wave of policy changes. Clearly, I'm very grateful to all the speakers who have made a complete blast today and made an amazing presentation. I would like to, unfortunately, draw this to a close today because we are running out of time. The only thing I would like to say is that I'd like to, first of all, invite you, where's my previous slide? To invite you to the next WEC conversation, which will happen in May. And in the meantime, ask you to please scan the QR code and let us know how you found this WEC conversation today, whether you enjoyed it or not. And For the rest, I thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you a very nice day, and I see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. All the best.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
See you soon.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.